Krista, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me
Yeah.
today.
So I kind of wanted to start. You have a short film here that just played, and it's your first as it's your directorial debut.
Yes.
Coming from a background of writing for so long, what did you sort of take from your writing career into making that first film?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I should have emailed with you about what the question. He was like, "Should we talk about the questions?" I was like, "No, let's just wing it." Now I'm like, what did I take from my writing career? Here's what. I've been a showrunner for a long time. I've been lucky enough to produce 5 pilots that I've written. And in television, the showrunner, the creator, is in many ways what the director is in film. Sort of, it's my vision that the director is trying to actualize, and so I get to be there every step of the way, and you know, it's a collaboration. And so I felt, you know, going to direct for the first time, it felt like I had a lot more experience at this than I realized. It felt much easier and much more comfortable and much more familiar than I expected it to the sleepless night before the day we shot the film.
Yeah. Now you've worked on shows that really have, you know, especially Shameless has a very distinct visual style. You know, as you sort of are going through the process of writing, whether it's in a writer's room or working on a pilot, do you feel like you have more freedom with a pilot that you will eventually have a little bit more say in sort of the visual feel of it, rather than working with a palette that's kind of already been established?
That is true both as a producer and as a writer. When you're hired to write for a television show that you didn't create, there's a unique skill set required, which is to suspend your own voice and write in the voice of the show creator. And what you hope for when you look for work is that you'll find a job where your voice somewhat naturally matches that of the creator. That's why I was very successful at Grey's Anatomy, because my voice is naturally similar to Shonda's. Whereas the show I was writing on before Grey's Anatomy was a Brian Fuller show called Wonder Falls. Brian's a genius. My voice is nothing like his, and it was hell. It was really hard. I couldn't do it. He just kept having to rewrite me. So
Did you not like writing talking animals?
I love writing talking animals. It's that his sense of humor is so specific and non-linear. It's always a non sequitur, and I don't think I don't think like he does. And so I tried so hard, but I had to learn on that show what had been said to me over and over again, which is that not every good writer can write every show. You have to be able to suspend your own voice and write in someone else's. And that's true as a you know, if you're directing episodic television. Shameless actually gives more freedom than most to directors. You'll notice that often an episode looks quite different from one episode to the next. John really lets the directors play. But in network television, there's not a lot of room to play. There's an established look for the show, and you're working within those parameters. Whereas when you're making a pilot, it's a lot more like making a movie, where you're imagining with the director, what is this palette? What's the palette going to be? How much is the camera going to move? What kind of, you know, how close, what's it going to look like week after week? And that's a really exciting thing to get to do. And I've relied heavily in my pilots. I've hired really great directors. Now I'm just talking, Steve. I'm just going to talk.
No, please, by all
I've
means.
hired really great directors, but then I read the statistics, the ACLU statistics on female directors in Hollywood, and I was horrified. And I suddenly felt a very powerful urgency to direct. I felt like I needed to say, as a woman in the arts who's been making and writing for a long time, I am equipped to tell my own story, and why am I always handing it off to some dude? And I'm not always handing it off to some dude. Sometimes it's a woman, but the number of sort of studio approvable women for pilots is super low. And the last time I was looking at pilot directors, the studio sent me a list with 75 male names and 6 women. And so I felt a responsibility to become a studio approvable director. So that's why Stars is that's why I made Stars, which is my short film, which is in the festival. I just answered questions you didn't ask.
No, they're great.
Okay.
And you know, Stars has a very strong female performer in Abigail Spencer.
Yeah.
You know, Emmy Rossum is a very versatile and strong performer in her own right. I mean, that must mean a lot to you to be working with people who can really really dig down deep and access parts of these stories that does the subject matter justice.
Yes. And I've worked with a lot of really great actors in my career, and I've worked with a lot of really not great actors in my career. And it's always better to work with great actors.
Shocking.
Abigail Spencer is a dream come true for a first-time director. She is. It was like playing a violin. It was like I would just tip it ever so slightly, tip the bow, and she just. I've worked with her a lot. She starred in 2 pilots that I wrote. We did an episode of Private Practice together. We are friends. We have a shorthand. So that was like a dream. She's incredible, and Emmy is extraordinary. I mean, if you've ever seen like her opera singing in Phantom of the Opera, and then her work on Shameless, she's got an incredible range. And I won't start naming the bad actors, but you'd be surprised that you don't know who they are. Like, you've watched these shows, but we do a really good job of cutting it and putting music under it and telling you what they were supposed to tell you emotionally, and yeah.
And that's, I imagine, it's a challenge in the writer's room is that you're not writing these shows in a vacuum. That ultimately people have to go actually perform what you're writing. Not just the quality of the performances, but also if there is this really intense subject matter that some of those shows and episodes that you've worked on have really kind of gotten in deep. How much of that are you thinking of when you're sort of breaking a story? Are you keeping in mind the specific like range of the actors involved? Is that a key component when you're putting a script together?
You learn as the seasons go on what the actors are good at and what they're not good at, and you start to write to that for sure. You with an actor like Emmy Rossum, the sky's the limit. With an actor like William Macy, the sky's the limit. There's never a conversation of like, can they do that? They can always do it. But with the more limited actors, you definitely get into just give him comedy. Just give him comedy. He can do the comedy. Give the tears to someone else, that kind of thing. And you start to think that way. I'm trying to think if there's an example that I could give that maybe something will come. But
yeah. Well, in the meantime,
without naming names, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yes, there are those conversations go on. But hopefully you've got mostly actors who you don't have to limit yourself creatively.
Do you let yourself sort of go sky's the limit when you're writing a pilot, not really knowing who you have?
Oh yeah. You go sky's the limit, and then maybe once it's cast, you do a little bit of a rewrite around what you know that actor can do, or around what you discovered in watching them audition. Sometimes the character comes to life, and suddenly you understand a moment that you didn't fully understand, and you rewrite it. But no, writing pilots is really like writing an independent feature. Except for that, the number of notes that you're navigating is a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine it's also difficult because you have to think of when you're writing a pilot, and maybe this is an incorrect assumption, what season 4 of that show is going to look like. Is that something you give thought to, or is that too much of a hindrance?
You give a little bit of thought to, can I sustain this for 4 seasons? How will I sustain it for 4 seasons? You will often get the question, okay, what's season 5? Especially if you're pitching something sort of high concept. And I usually pitch sort of an end to season 1, maybe an end to season 2, but you're looking for an idea that is sustainable, where you go, oh, I get that for 5 years. I get what that is for 5 years. And sometimes your idea is not sustainable for 5 years, and I've made 5 pilots. I've written 8. So I've made 5 of the 8. I've not gone to series yet. So I've never had the opportunity to see if my ideas can sustain for 5 years.
You talked a little bit earlier about the sort of the network cable divide. Has that grown in your estimation over the last sort of 10 years, or is the difference not as much as it may seem from a viewer's perspective?
I wrote network television for the first 13 years that I was writing television, and I almost exclusively watched network television during those years. It just happened that way. I've never sat and analyzed this, but off the top of my head, I want to say that Breaking Bad changed everything. It changed everything in my body. When they made Breaking Bad, it was so nothing you'd ever be allowed to make on network television. And the way they took the hero and made him the anti-hero by the end, like the way I don't want to ruin. Has anybody not watched all of Breaking Bad? All right. But it's what they do on that show is so groundbreaking, and you would never be allowed to do it in network television traditionally. The question always up until that point, and still I navigated a lot in network TV, is he likable enough? And so when Tony Soprano and then Walter White, it was like, and Damages and all these people who, it was like, there's an appetite for not all that likable. And that made us all kind of, you start to want to go to cable for that reason. A lot of writers are going to cable because you have more permission to play in territory that advertisers find icky, right? Because the profit model is different. So HBO can do whatever they want because we're paying HBO for the right to watch those shows. It's not tied advertising on the television show and where you have to be afraid of offending the advertisers or middle America who will write to those advertisers. It's a whole different thing in network TV.
Yeah. I kind of want to go back to what you sort of talked about at the beginning about sort of writing for the voice of a show. And obviously that's not just sort of the characters, it's not just dialogue. Are there certain things that an audience member might not pick up on the voice of a show that a writer might be sort of more tuned into?
What I can tell you is this. The advice I was given, when I started writing TV, it was standard to write spec scripts. Until very recently, it was standard to write spec scripts. I still require people to write spec scripts if I'm looking to hire writers. A spec script is a sample episode of an existing television show. You're showing me that you can suspend your own voice and write in someone else's voice. The new trend lately, the last few years, is all pilots and plays. And I'm like, great, I love the pilot, I love the play, show me a spec. Now I'm old school. Like now I'm old in that because I don't want a room full of unique voices that can't write in mine. I spent a long time writing in other people's voices. And the advice that I was given and that I really believe is true is you never want to send your spec script to the television show that you wrote. So the reason for that is when I would read, first of all, there are legal issues. So if I can't read anything at Grey's Anatomy because now you're going to sue me because I happen to be writing the same storyline. But also for friends, occasionally I would read their, spec of Grey's Anatomy, and it's like there are rules in any writer's room that you do not know watching the show, but they're they've been pounded into our blood about how certain characters talk. And Christina uses very few words. And, for the first couple years of Grey's Anatomy, Shonda's anthem, she made us T-shirts, was no hugging, no crying, and no secret pain. And then then you get a spec and everybody's hugging and crying and there's a lot of secret pain and Christina's talking, and you go, it sort of looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, but it's not a duck, and I don't know why. And it's because we're doing it all day, every day. That voice is in us, and so even if you're doing a pretty good job at it, it's going to bug us when you're breaking our rules that you have no way of knowing about. So you write a sample episode of Grey's Anatomy to send to Lost. Now, I'm speaking about shows that the kids in this room don't know what they are. But
Some of us have memories of 2004.
Okay, good.
Especially, there's some threads on Grey's and Shameless that their characters dealing with troubles in their life, but they're characters that aren't defined by their flaws. And I think that's sometimes that's a hard thing for a writer to balance is showing somebody who sort of is dealing with issues in their personal life, but trying to sort of go past them. Is that difficult for you or for some writers that you've noticed to sort of break out of that pattern and to sort of make characters that are more sort of three-dimensional?
I don't understand that question. I'm sorry.
So I mean, I'm thinking of characters on Shameless who sort of have their foibles and
yes,
but they're not dominated by it.
They are just flawed. They are just one big, like the Gallaghers are one big flaw, and their humanity matters more than their flaws. Yes. I don't know. I've never read a spec script of Shameless. It's been the same staff on Shameless since I've been on Shameless. There's one writer was added in the last couple of years. So, and John Wells takes care of that. I don't run Shameless. I just get to be on staff and show up. And but I will say, so I can't speak to what writers do or don't do, but what I can tell you is that the joy of writing Shameless for me is how flawed those people get to be after so many years of writing network television, that people can physically attack each other and then have a beer together in the next scene, and that Frank can be an alcoholic narcissist to the degree that he is, and somehow you still care about him, and that Fiona sort of like fucks her way through America, and that's okay because she's 24 and she's parentless, and these kids are raising each other, and Carl is just such a little criminal, and you don't have to edit any impulse, and yet all of your humanity gets to come out, and all of your sense of humor, and all of your sense of pain and pathos. I get to do all of that on that show. It's a great day job.
And for a feature film, it's something that you make and sort of put out into the world. With TV, there's that added element of fans responding to things evolving over time. I mean, obviously, you can't read specs that people send in, but I imagine that there are some fan concerns and fan favorites that kind of seep their way in. How do you sort of keep that thread in mind?
No matter how I answer this question, I will be assaulted for 48 hours straight on Twitter as soon as everybody sees this panel, if it's being filmed. We cannot keep fan concerns in mind when we are writing a television show, because if you try to write to the vociferous fans, you are writing to a small and loud group of passionate people, and coming off your own creative center and trying to please. You cannot get into people pleasing and be an artist simultaneously. You cannot get into people pleasing and be an artist simultaneously. And so our job when we sit in the writer's room is to please ourselves. Our job, as your filmmakers were saying, is to take the paintbrush and paint. And the fans go for the ride or they don't. But if we start trying to answer fan concerns with the next script, first of all, it's just not possible in terms of timing. By the time a fan is seeing an episode, we're 4 or 5 episodes out. And so, with tremendous love for the fandom of all the shows that I've written for, I'm a fan of the shows that I've written for too. I'm also a fan of other television shows, and I have loved and hated certain storylines with a passion. I love the passion, but I cannot write to make my friend on Twitter, there's a guy on Twitter who was so sweet in trying to explain to me why he wanted to kill me for Ian and Mickey breaking up or whatever. But he was so gentle and lovely. And so I engaged with him personally and privately to try to help him understand also what happens behind the scenes. Here's a story for the fans. One time there was a character, an actor who left Grey's Anatomy. And there have been enough actors who've left Grey's Anatomy now that I think I can tell this story without exposing. An actor left the show. The actor's storyline was unresolved. The fans were overwhelmingly angry that the storyline was unresolved. The writers were overwhelmingly angry that the storyline was unresolved. The actor agreed to come back and let us finish that story. I wrote my heart out because I loved that character and had been writing that character for so long. This episode that just told the end of that character's story. And at the 11th hour, that actor refused to come back and do that episode. And then gave a press release, like made a statement that we didn't have them back. You notice I'm not even giving you guys a gender. And I had to stay up all night for several nights re-breaking and rewriting a new episode. And then I got ambushed with hate mail on social media because we never brought that actor back. So what I'm saying is, to the passionate fandoms, you have no idea, no matter how much press you read, what actually is happening behind the scenes, because it's a lie. The press is a lie. The press is a lie. People are playing you. I have sat in writer's room where press releases were written on, when I was on Charmed, the press around when one of the actresses left the show was all a lie. It's a fabrication factory, Hollywood. So you think you're super duper in the know about what's happening behind the scenes on your favorite show. So it must be not that the actor didn't want to come back. It must be those fucking writers. You're almost always wrong. It's almost always the actor. And so, and we're suffering for it too. And so it's very complicated trying to navigate fandoms and not really get your feelings hurt and really be a bitch baby about it. And you want to tell the truth and you're not allowed to tell the truth because you've signed non-disclosures and it's just a shit show. So the answer is you can't be an artist and simultaneously try to please everybody. You will lose your center, you will lose your soul, you will lose your vision. And so my friend on Twitter, I write him these stories and I try to explain, but I cannot resolve the storyline the way he wants me to resolve it. Because A, it's not up to me. B, it's not up to me. And C, I can't people please or I won't be an artist anymore.
And I think that you know, you mentioning that you're a fan of characters and specific characters, it's not just sort of keeping everybody on set happy with sort of balancing out these ensembles, but creatively to manage, you know, some of these episodes have, you know, 5, 6, 7 different storylines. How I guess that's the benefit of having a writer's room is sort of keeping those sort of disparate voices and making sure that you're not losing sight of one character in favor of another.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we writers often have favorite storylines and favorite characters, but we all have to write every storyline and every character. A common misconception about the writing of television is people think that, like, I just write all the Izzy storylines on Grey's Anatomy and somebody else writes all the Meredith, and that's not how it works. We each take a whole episode and have to write all of those characters. And yes, we have boards in the writer's room that pull all of the characters through all of the seasons, and so we can look and go, you know, we haven't really given anything juicy to George this season. Let's, you know, kill his dad. But it's easier to talk about shows from the past than what I'm presently working on. I get in less trouble that way. So.
One of the things that I appreciate about these shows is that they that there's. You're talking earlier about sort of women behind the camera, but I think for a number of groups in society, that representation on screen has not been kind to them over the last ever, really. And the shows that you've worked on have really I think, done a lot to sort of help change that.
Yes.
As you're writing sort of pilots going forward, I imagine that's a great concern to you to sort of improve the way that television as a medium represents all people and not just a specific area of culture.
Yes, it's a hobby of mine to try to spread the love. But also, I'm a woman, and so I naturally tell my stories from a female perspective. Women are still radically underrepresented in television and film, radically underrepresented. I no longer am entertained by television shows on HBO that the only female characters are corpses that the camera lovingly lingers on, no matter how critically acclaimed the male director of that quietly misogynist program may be. I am no longer entertained. I cannot abide anymore as a viewer, as a human, as a woman, as a mother, as an American, with Donald Trump talking about grabbing women by the pussy, and he's still a candidate for United States president. I can't abide it. And so, yeah, it's a hobby of mine to represent women and gay people, LGBTQ, and people of color in ways that traditionally television doesn't give them room to play.
And and not just letting them be defined by their tokenism and just like, we're going to have the one person who comes to sort of fill out our roster of diversity. Yeah.
It's super crazy. Yeah. I've written now 3 pilots in which I make siblings of mine half black, because even though they're not, I come from a family, there are 5 of us, and we happen to all be Caucasian, but that's a coincidence because we have many different parents among us. We are halves and we are steps, and none of us have the same 2 parents. And so when I depict siblings, I often just depict them like somebody's half black and somebody's half Latina. I've done that in 3 pilots now, because let's spread the love a little bit, just because my family's white. And then I wrote this, and then I wrote Studio City, which is about my siblings, and I had diversified the cast, and then one of the producers said, "Where are the gays?" And I was like, "Where are the gays?" Like, usually half my cast is gay, and because it was my siblings and I was writing them very specifically, I was like, "Oh man!" So I wrote to I was like, "Who wants to be gay in Studio City?" All my sisters volunteered. So anyway, we get to play. And yeah, tokenism doesn't interest me. Actual juicy stories interest me. And as a result, though, like, one of the things, for example, on Shameless, Shameless I like to think of as an equal opportunity offender. And this season we're doing all sorts of LGBTQ, we've got a trans storyline, we've got a lot of really interesting, juicy stuff, playing with a bisexuality thing. And already I'm being assaulted that we're stereotyping. Like, people haven't even seen the episodes, but it's like, the bisexual is the cheater. Great storytelling. It's like, oh man, everybody's a cheater on Shameless. Name a character who hasn't cheated. It's like, it's equal opportunity offensive, and I feel like we've got to be super careful that we're not so easily offended as that we're not so easily offended that it's like, I'm so fucking sick of female corpses, but I can roll with some slutty chicks. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need all my women to be Hillary Clinton, right? I'm going to write women in a million different ways. I'm just not going to linger on their dead bodies. That's my line. And so one of the things as we come out of tokenism that we have to be aware of is that we're also going to sometimes be equal opportunity offending everybody. If you are open color casting a role, and the best dude who comes in is Asian for that role, and you want to cast him, and you have to go, oh wait, because it's for a computer nerd. Is that a stereotype? Maybe we should give it to the white guy. I have heard that conversation. I do not want to. We cannot be so careful about sort of political correctness and not offending that we move backwards, that we don't represent.
All right, and with that, I think it's a good time to open it up to the audience if there are any questions. So let's start right here in the front, and then we'll move our way back.
Who are your favorite female directors and why?
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
How much time do you have?
The movie that made me want to be a writer was Nicole Holofcener's Walking and Talking. I love her. I'm a huge, 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 huge fan because she writes women the way I experience women. And I just love that slice of life style. She just made me want to try it. And in television, I got to work last year with Senna Hamri, who's now the producing director on Empire, and she's just a serious badass. She's just a serious badass of a human being. I worked with Leslie Linka Glatter, who's the producing director on Homeland. She's amazing. She's amazing because she carries red lipstick with her everywhere she goes. She reapplies it. No joke. She calls it her nervous tick, but she reapplies it approximately every 10 minutes and like reapplies her lipstick and goes, action! Like she's this incredible woman with these bright red lips who is as badass and as like, she's like the boss, but she doesn't feel any need to present like a man. And I love that. Jill Soloway, I know Jill. I worked with Jill on Grey's Anatomy, and then I went and I saw Afternoon Delight, which was her directorial feature at Sundance. And Jill's director talkback after that film is what made me know that I could try my hand at directing, because she talked about how it's a very male notion that you have to know and understand all the technology, all the lenses. She's like, I don't give a shit about the lenses. I want to tell you how I want to feel. And then I want somebody else to handle the lenses. And that permission to go, oh God, I don't have to put myself in like this very male technical brain. I can get a DP and I can say to that DP, male or female, this is how I feel, and this is how I feel, and this is how I want it to feel, and maybe a little bit this is how I want it to look. And I can trust that this can be a collaborative process. Set me free. And I will always be grateful to Jill for that. And Transparent is fucking mind-blowing television. And Lake Bell's film that same year at Sundance also just blew my mind.
In a World?
In a World.
Yeah.
And she won the screenwriting award that year, and Jill won the directing award that year. And I came away knowing that there was more I could do creatively. And so,
yeah. Awesome. So we'll keep moving. Yeah, clap. Awesome. And then we'll move back to here.
Can't people just project?
Hey, as a Canadian, and you mentioned writing spec scripts and kind of pilots is the way to kind of get into a writing room these days. But as a Canadian, how do you kind of see, who would you send spec scripts to, and how do you see the pathway for someone like myself living in BC as a writer?
You have to get an agent. And I think that there's a lot of television, Canadian television being produced in Canada, isn't there? Yes? There's a lot of Canadian, because I know there's a lot of American television being produced up here. But the Canadian television writers that I know got their start writing and producing Canadian television, and then transitioned into American television when that became a thing they wanted to do. And I have to imagine, although I'm not Canadian, that it's a very similar process, which is that you have to find an agent. And the way that you go about finding an agent, in my humble opinion, is to go to every party you ever get invited to and to tell every person you meet that you're a writer and to ask them to read your scripts. And that, by every person you meet, I mean the waiters and the assistants. Don't try to get me to read your script. Try to get my assistant to read your script, because she's more likely to do it and then to mention to me that she read something great. The way that I got my first agent is that I went to Kegger in West Hollywood and mentioned that I was a writer, and my friend said to his friend, you know, Chris Lasada, this guy Chris Lasada, was an assistant at an agency, and would he read Krista's script? And Chris read my script, and he liked it, and he passed it along to his friend, who was also an assistant, who was breaking off to become an agent. So you have to network, but before you do all that, you have to have several scripts finished. Do not write one script and then go network and say you're a writer. Write, I would say, at a minimum 5, because the first 2 will not be very good. And the next 3 will be much closer to what you're capable of. And if you send me one script and I go, this is great, what else do you have? And you don't have anything else, you've wasted my time, because you're not actually a writer yet. Writers write, and they generate material and more material. They put it away, they write something else, they come back to it and they fix it. And I remember the feeling of having finished my first script and how thrilling and invigorating that was, and how I felt like, now I'm a writer. Sure, but you have to have another one. You cannot not have another one when I say, what else do you have? So write a lot of scripts, then go to parties and tell everybody you're a writer, and ask everybody to read your stuff and take their feedback, and that's hopefully how you'll get an agent.
Anybody else? Let's keep going in the middle back there.
I was going to project. This says, join her for a master class on what it takes to succeed at the highest level. Have you talked to that point? Did I miss it?
What it takes to succeed at the highest level? I didn't write that. What I actually think it takes to succeed at every level is a collaborative spirit, a collaborative willingness. I am not a big fan of the auteur myth. I do think it's a myth most of the time. Just like one of your directors here was saying, if he took one of the credits off the film wouldn't be what it is. Filmmaking and television is a collaborative process. And studio television is a painfully collaborative process. The amount of drafts of that script that you have to write, and the amount of opinions, and the amount of notes that you have to navigate. If I actually talked you through it, you wouldn't believe me. It would shock you how many people's notes you're taking, and how many drafts. And if you get stuck in and offended by notes, it's the quickest way to fail. It's the quickest way to fail. It's the quickest way to not climb the ladder, is to be somebody who can't take a note. Or, I knew a writer who the showrunner gave her notes, and she went back in and changed his words back to her own words. You know what I mean? Like, super crazy, and even if you're super talented, you'll get stuck at a low level or at a mid level. The dance of success at an upper level in Hollywood is taking notes and metabolizing them through your body in such a way that you are also able to remain true to your creative vision. And that is like fucking ninja shit. I can't tell you how to do that. It takes a lot of practice to get to the point where you're not pulled off your center by every note, where you go, I get what that note is. I don't think it's addressed the way you're telling me to address it, but I hear you. I get it. I'm going to go work on it. I think it's actually a problem in scene 3. They're telling me it's a problem in scene 10. I didn't set up scene 10 properly. Let me fix scene 3 and see if it doesn't solve this for you. To know how to take a note and still love what you're turning in. If you get pulled into taking notes to please other people, and then you're turning in stuff that you don't stand by and saying, well, they took the notes. Well, they gave me those notes and they ruined it. It doesn't work. So that's the dance. That's, if you're a student, you get with writing groups and practice taking their notes even when you don't agree with them. Hugely important.
Yeah, it seems like, the old adage that you can't help other people until you help yourself. It seems like that's the same in the writing process too. Like, you can't really address other people's concerns unless you know how to solve them yourself. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to consider the possibility that you're wrong, that they're right. Like sometimes you're so proud of your stuff and you hand it in and then they've got these notes which seem insane. And I've had this experience over and over where like inside my body, like my teeth are about to break because I'm biting so hard. I'm silent. Oh, I hear that. Let me go away and think about it. But then I call my friend and I rage. You can't rage at the people giving you the notes, but you can call your friends and rage about the notes. And then a week later you look at the script and you're like, oh, fuck me, they're right. It's like when your ego has settled down a little and you have a little bit of distance. So that's the key is to yes, take the notes, take pause, and then figure out where are they right or where are they a little bit right or where are they completely wrong, but you can change a word or two that makes them feel like you listened to them.
Yeah, let's go right here on the side.
Hi, Krista.
Hi.
Hi. You spoke earlier to tokenism and, trying to please everyone, well, trying not to please everyone, but still representing where you need to. I just wondered if you've happened to have an opinion or have found a balance between staying true to what you write, but also, in a sense, people-pleasing by making sure you represent all the diversification between gender, race, and sexuality. Because I still find that's almost a sense of audience-pleasing these days because people are so easily offended.
Right. So what's the question?
The question is, have you found a balance between representing for pleasing the wider audience and staying true to what you write, or is that a dance as well?
For me, it pleases me deeply when I represent underrepresented communities. And so that isn't people pleasing for me. That's like me feeling like a fucking revolutionary inside Hollywood. Like I just put that on TV. Like I wrote an episode of Shameless not that long ago where 8 out of 9 guest actors were women of color. And I just did it. Like, oh, I think that's a black woman. And it just like when I was talking to the casting director, oh, that's a Latina woman. Oh, that's an Asian woman. I just did it. And I sort of thought like, is anybody going to say anything to me about this? Because it's a really more colorful cast than is maybe typical of I never would have gotten away with that, say, on Charmed. Nobody said a word on Shameless, and it was delightful to me. It was delightful to me to just quietly chip away at the problem. So no, I will say that I don't get into people pleasing with this. I please me. And if someone asks a question and goes, hey, where are the gays? It displeases me that I somehow didn't put any gay people in this television show. So I'm going to fix that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go in the middle here.
With your history of writing, show running, and just creating so many pilots, what's your process for taking out your voice in characters when you're giving dialogue? Just because you have so many diverse cast and diverse characters from different backgrounds that, no one person can relate to every single human being.
Right. So what's my process for giving them unique voices?
Yes.
So they don't all sound like versions of yourself.
Right. Yeah. I have I have friends and a lot of life experiences with a lot of different types of people. And what I tend to do is think of that, it's like I think of this character like my best friend Peter, and that character like that guy I dated in college, George. And I often hear the voices of the characters in my life and assign them accordingly. And sometimes it's, I watched a lot of ER and growing up, I watched a lot of whatever, and that's how I remember those doctors talking or whatever it is. I call on, I can't understand every human being, but I can try to understand. As a human being, and I think this is part of what makes me a writer, I try to understand the point of view of I even spent some time trying to understand the point of view of Trump supporters because I need to, for my sanity, try to understand. So I try to understand different points of view and different perspectives, and I listen carefully to people's rhythms and to their voices, to the syntax that they choose. And then it, people often will say to me, "Oh my God, did you base that character on so and so from high school?" And I laugh and I go, "Well, I did not do that consciously, but now that you say it, I totally did."
Yeah, let's go right here.
Can you talk about the Emmys? You've been nominated for 3 of them, one of them for writing, but they don't always submit all the writers for a given show. And then also on Shameless, that was one of the rare shows where they initially submitted as a drama, later as a comedy. So what kind of conversations do you have among the producers and writers about that kind of strategizing?
The showrunner decides which episodes get submitted for Emmys, and some showrunners do it by what they think was the best episode of the year, and some showrunners do it by which episodes they wrote because they want the Emmy, and that is, their prerogative. Shameless was a mistake. Showtime listed it as a drama. It took somewhere between 3 and 5 years for John Wells to get them to change it into the comedy category. I believe that Shameless would have won a lot of Emmys by now if it had been in the right category from the beginning. At least changing it to comedy got Bill Macy some well-deserved comedy nominations. I will tell you that the Emmys are super boring to go to, but the Golden Globes are really fun.
I think we have time for one last question. Let's go up here in the middle. Yeah, let's project. Let's do it.
Yes. Do not be quiet. Do not be polite. Do not wait for your turn. Women are underrepresented in film and television because women are underrepresented as writers and producers, and people tell stories from their own perspective. So most of the time, men are telling stories from the male perspective, and women are telling stories from the female perspective. It's very important to me personally, because I'm raising a daughter, that you come get a seat at the table in Hollywood, because I need 50% of writers and producers to be women soon, so that there's representation, because I'm sick of it. So don't sit quietly and wait for permission to do your art. Do it. Do it. It's super hard. Do it anyway. Everything in life is super hard. And it's harder as a woman. We are not as encouraged societally to take chances. And filmmaking is a super chancy career. It's hard. You might not land. You might not make a living. What's going to happen? Are you going to have spent your whole 20s and then you're going to wish you had babies? No, you're not. You'll have your babies. Make your art. Take a chance. Be a waitress at night and a filmmaker by day. Do it. It's super hard. Do it anyway. Being a doctor is super hard too. You have to go to medical school for 8 years. And those people sleep 2 hours a night, and they systematically lose their minds. And then they graduate, and they don't have that big of a starting salary to start. And then they go to work and they have a bad day because they didn't sleep, and maybe they had a baby and she stayed up all night and kept them awake. And now they accidentally killed a person. They had a bad day at work, they killed a person. Now they got sued and they lost their medical license, and they're 26 and it's over. And that is common. And nobody talks about it when you say you want to be a doctor. They go, yeah, do it, go do it. You say you want to be a filmmaker, it's oh, that's super hard. It is hard. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Do your art, make your stuff, get it out there. Tell people you're a filmmaker, tell people you're a writer, tell people you're an actor. Be fucking proud of the fact that you're an artist and that you're brave enough to try at this thing that doesn't have a super reliable plan. And make great art and put it out there and show up and come to Hollywood and be a part of the next generation of filmmakers, because my daughter needs you to, and I need you to. That's my advice.
What a wonderful note to end on. Krista, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you again to the Directors Guild of Canada for sponsoring this little talk that we had. And thank you for coming and for
you guys,
sticking
thank
out.
you so much. I have to catch a plane, or normally I would stand and talk to you for a long time, but I'm going to have to beeline out of here pretty quickly because I have to go. Okay, thank you. Thanks.